I want you to picture something for a second. Just imagine you were standing in this old, dusty university lecture hall, right? And you're right in front of a massive wall-to-wall chalkboard.
Oh, I can picture that. Chalk dust everywhere.
Exactly. And you pick up a piece of chalk and you write down a single mathematical equation. Now, this isn't something familiar, like E equals mc squared.
Right, right.
I mean, that equation is elegant. Sure, it tells you how energy and mass relate.
Yeah.
But, and it's not Newton's law of universal gravitation either, which is great for figuring out why an apple falls from a tree or how a planet orbits a star.
No, this is much bigger than that.
So much bigger.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine an equation that represents the actual literal source code for reality itself.
The blueprint.
Yeah. A single line of mathematics that doesn't just describe the universe after the fact,
Yeah.
but provides the exact underlying engineering blueprints for how the universe renders every single moment.
And a huge concept.
It's massive. We are talking about an equation that contains the mathematical instructions for, like, anti-gravity, for stargates,
0-point energy.
zero-point energy extraction, an equation that essentially tells you how to hack the fabric of existence, manipulating it the same way a programmer manipulates the physics engine of a video game.
It is an incredibly bold premise. And frankly, I mean, it is the kind of claim that usually gets laughed out of the room in mainstream physics.
Oh, absolutely.
But the source material we are pulling apart today is forcing a lot of people to stop laughing and start paying very close attention.
Yeah, they can't ignore it anymore.
No, they can't. We are doing a deep dive into a paper published in June of 2026 by an independent researcher. His name is George James Dukas.
Okay.
And the title of the paper alone sets an incredibly audacious stage. It's called The Universe Master Equation, Master of Reality.
Wow. Just claiming it right there in the title.
Oh, yeah. It serves as the foundational text for a framework Dukas calls the Transdimensional Unified Field Theory, or TDUFT for short.
TDUFT. Okay. And I know exactly what you listening might be thinking right now. You hear a phrase like transdimensional unified field theory, you hear master equation, and your brain immediately flashes to that chalkboard covered in dense, terrifying Greek symbols.
The kind that give you a headache just looking at them.
Exactly.
Hmm.
You might be assuming you need a PhD in theoretical physics and, like, advanced calculus to even look at this document.
Which is totally understandable.
Right. But here is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to completely demystify this.
Yes.
We're going to take this massive, complex-looking mathematical expression, and we're going to break it down line by line.
Symbol by symbol.
Symbol by symbol, yeah.
Yeah.
We are going to get bogged down in textbook jargon. Instead, we are going to explore the underlying logic.
Because once you actually unpack what Dukas is proposing, you uncover a description of the universe that is entirely different from anything we've ever been taught in school.
It's like a completely different paradigm.
It really is. It describes a universe that isn't just, a cold, empty box where random things occasionally bump into each other. It describes something living, something organic and completely interconnected.
So where do we even begin with something this massive?
Well, the place we have to start is with Dukas's fundamental starting premise. Because he doesn't just try to build a new floor onto the existing house of modern physics.
Right.
He essentially brings a wrecking ball to the entire foundation.
Just knocks the whole thing down.
Exactly. He claims that the unquestioned giants of physics, I'm talking Isaac Newton, James Clerk Maxwell, Albert Einstein, he says they are all fundamentally wrong.
That is a wild claim to make.
Or, well, to use his specific terminology from the paper, their models are merely incomplete phenomenological fits.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase right away. Phenomenological fits.
Right.
To me, that sounds like a very polite academic way of saying they just guessed based on what they could see from their limited vantage point.
That's a great way to put it.
Like they completely missed the actual underlying machinery.
That is a very accurate way to translate it, yeah. To understand why Dukas makes this claim, you have to look at what classical physics actually does.
Okay.
Classical physics is entirely based on the observation of macroscopic events.
Right.
So Newton watches an apple fall, he observes the moon in the sky, and he writes a mathematical rule that describes that behavior.
Right. He sees the result and writes a rule for it.
Exactly. And then Einstein comes along later and says, well, Newton's invisible tether of gravity doesn't really make sense, so let's imagine space and time as a continuous fabric.
The classic rubber sheet analogy.
Yes, a smooth rubber sheet that bends when you put a heavy bowling ball on it. But Dukas argues that all of this force is acting in three-dimensional space, continuous classical fields, even Einstein's beautifully curved space-time. He says they are merely shadows on the cave wall.
Wow. Shadows on the cave wall.
Yeah, they are limited, low-resolution projections of a much deeper, hidden geometry that we just haven't been able to see until now.
You know, it makes me think about looking at like a high-definition television screen, but from all the way across a very large room.
Okay, I like this. Go on.
Like, when Newton and Einstein look at the screen, they are describing the picture. They see the actors, the scenery, the movement. They observe the narrative playing out, and they write a law for it.
Right, they map the story.
Yeah. They say, look, that character always moves left when the car explodes, and they call that the law of leftward explosion or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But what Dukas is doing is walking right up to the screen, pulling out a jeweler's magnifying glass, and saying, wait a minute, there are no actors. There is no scenery.
There is no continuous image at all.
Exactly. There are only millions of individual discrete pixels. And they're flashing red, green, and blue based on a specific underlying algorithmic code.
The screen analogy gets right to the heart of the mathematical shift Dukas is proposing here, because Einstein's model requires the universe to be a continuum.
Right, a smooth, unbroken sheet.
Exactly, but Dukas says that spacetime is not a continuum at all. It is a discrete, infinite dimensional lattice.
So it's pixelated.
Yes, it is pixelated. And to understand the algorithm running those pixels, we have to look at the most critical, foundational rule of Dukas's entire theory. He calls it an operator-first ontology.
Okay, hold on. Operator-first ontology. That sounds like a heavy mix of philosophy and computer science.
It does, and it borrows heavily from both. But it solves a very real, very stubborn problem in physics.
Which is what?
Well, in conventional mathematics and physics, you have different categories of objects you work with. You have scalars, which are just static numbers.
Okay.
Like mass is a scalar, temperature is a scalar, it's just a value sitting there.
Just a measurement.
Right. Then you have variables, which represent a quantity that might change, but essentially they just sit there waiting to be measured.
Okay, makes sense.
But in TDUFT, Dukas insists that absolutely everything in his universe master equation is an operator. There are no scalars. There are no passive static variables.
Wow. Wait, so for you listening, an operator in mathematics is basically a function that does something. It's an instruction.
Exactly.
Takes an input, performs a specific action on it, and produces a new output. So when Dukas says everything in the universe is an operator, he's saying nothing is just sitting there.
Nothing is static.
Everything is an action.
The shift in perspective is massive. Think about the classic conception of, say, a rock sitting on the ground.
Okay.
In Newton's universe, that rock is a static object. It has a set mass, it occupies a set volume of space, and unless a force acts upon it, it just exists.
It's a noun.
It's a noun. But in Dukas' operator-first universe, there are no nouns. There is no static rock.
Okay, let me bring that video game engine analogy back in here because I think it makes this incredibly clear.
Go for it.
If you're playing a massive open-world video game and your character walks up to a boulder, that boulder feels solid. It looks solid.
Right. You can't walk through it.
Exactly. But it doesn't actually exist inside the computer's memory as a physical solid object. It is a subroutine. Yes. It is a cluster of active, ongoing processes. The game engine is constantly calculating its coordinates, constantly recalculating how the virtual sunlight hits its surface, constantly running collision detection so your character doesn't walk through it.
Constantly refreshing.
Yeah. The rock isn't a thing. It is an action being performed by the game engine, rendering frame by frame 60 times a second.
And the physics engine of reality, according to Dukas, functions the exact same way.
That's mind-blowing.
It is. The universe itself is the ultimate active operation. He defines the foundational building blocks of this reality as dimensional nodes.
Okay, dimensional nodes.
Which he writes out in the math as d to the power of n, or dn. But it is crucial to understand that dn isn't a spatial dimension like we usually think of.
So it's not like 3D space.
Right. It's not width or depth or height. It is a dimensional node field state existing at a specific tier, which is the n.
Okay, so if I'm visualizing this, the universe isn't a giant empty cardboard box that planets and stars are floating around inside of. The universe is a discrete dimensional lattice. It's an infinitely complex, interconnected web of these dimensional nodes.
Yes, a massive web.
And every single node is an operator.
Yeah.
It is constantly calculating, constantly operating, constantly rendering the localized state of reality.
Exactly. And here's why this specific mathematical approach is so revolutionary. Classical physics tries to mix static numbers with dynamic quantum fields.
Right.
And when you try to combine the smooth, continuous math of Einstein's gravity with the choppy, discrete math of quantum mechanics, the equations break down.
That's the big problem in physics, right? The grand unified theory issue.
Exactly. They produce infinities. It's the reason we still don't fully understand what happens at the center of a black hole. The math literally self-destructs.
Because it just can't compute it.
Right. But Dukas steps back and says, the math is breaking because you are mixing nouns and verbs. Make everything a verb. Make everything an operator.
Oh, wow.
And when you do that, the universe becomes a pure algebraic structure of action, and all those infinities just vanish.
It's a complete paradigm shift. But it immediately forces a massive question for me.
What's that?
Well, if reality isn't static, if it is this constantly updating software program, a vast lattice of active node operators, there has to be a master line of code that dictates how it updates.
Exactly. The engine needs a rule book.
Right. The lattice has to know what state to render next.
Which brings us to the left side of the universe master equation. This is the setup. This is the part of the equation that establishes the baseline evolution of existence.
Okay, left side of the equation.
Mathematically, it is written as the partial derivative of drn with respect to tau.
Okay, let's translate that out of calculus speak for a second.
Good idea.
So the partial derivative of the dimensional field din with respect to tau. What we are really asking the equation here is, how does the fabric of reality update itself?
Precisely.
Like, what is the rate of change of the universe's foundational dimensional state?
Exactly. It describes the pure evolution of the lattice. But if you look closely at the source text here, Dukas introduces a temporal prediction here that completely shatters our conventional, everyday understanding of reality.
Because of the tau.
Yes. He uses the Greek letter tau to represent this evolution, but he is incredibly explicit in the paper that tau is fundamentally different from t.
And this is where I really have to push back, because this kind of broke my brain a little bit when I was reading the source material.
It's a tough concept to swallow.
It really is. Because in every physics class ever taught, T stands for time. We have T right there in the equation representing physical clock time.
Right.
But Dukas aggressively separates the evolution of the universe, which he calls tau, from clock time. T. Why? I mean, if the dimensional lattice of the universe is updating and changing state,
Yeah.
isn't that update process just what time is?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. How can you have change without time?
Well, your reaction is exactly how Newton and Einstein would have reacted. They inextricably linked the evolution of the universe to the passage of time.
It just makes intuitive sense.
It does, but Dukas argues that physical clock time, the T we're familiar with, is nothing more than local coordinate time.
Local coordinate time, okay.
It's an illusion created by our physical instruments, the ticking of a mechanical watch, the decaying of a radioactive atom, the revolution of the Earth around the sun. Those are local, superficial measurements.
Okay.
But tau, this new parameter, is the internal evolution parameter of the dimensional lattice itself.
So to go back to the computer analogy, tau is the actual internal frame rate or the processor clock speed of the universe's engine.
That is the perfect way to look at it, yes.
Okay.
And the profound implication here is that dimensional evolution can proceed without physical clock advancement.
Wait, really?
Yes. The fundamental lattice of reality can update, it can change state, it can undergo massive structural evolution entirely outside of standard time.
Okay, wait. Let's really think about what this implies for our lived experience.
It's wild.
Because if tau is decoupled from time, how do we experience causality? I mean, if the universe is updating its rendering without the clock ticking, wouldn't objects just teleport around us?
Right.
How does Dukas reconcile our lived continuous experience of time with this underlying jumping frame rate?
It is a brilliant question. Dukas would argue that our macroscopic brains and our physical instruments are constrained to the two coordinate.
We're trapped in two.
Exactly. We are only capable of perceiving the rendered output, the shadow on the wall we talked about earlier. We cannot perceive the tau evolution. Let me refine your computer analogy to explain how causality is maintained here.
Please do, because I need it.
Okay, imagine you are streaming a highly complex movie on your laptop.
Okay.
The movie playing on the screen, the actors speaking, the cars driving, that is clock time, 2-pan. It moves at a steady, observable pace.
Right.
But suddenly, your computer starts running a massive system-wide background virus scan.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Right. The processor is working furiously. Millions of complex calculations are happening at the core level of the machine. The internal state of the computer's memory is evolving rapidly.
Okay, I'm following.
That deep, invisible processing is tau. Now, the movie on your screen might actually freeze for a moment, clock time effectively stops for the viewer, but the internal evolution, the tau, is still racing forward at billions of cycles per second.
Oh, okay.
Causality isn't broken. The complex processing is simply happening on a deeper layer than the display output. Dukas is saying reality works exactly like this.
That is staggering.
The dimensional fabric of the universe can undergo incredibly complex mathematical changes, even if physical time, as we measure it, stands completely still.
Wow. And if you think about it, that decoupled evolution, the separation of tau and t, is the only way phenomena like stargates or faster-than-light travel could ever become mathematically viable. Because if you are strictly bound by t, you are bound by the speed of light. Einstein proved that. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time until you hit a wall.
The universal speed limit.
Right. But if you can build a device that manipulates tau, you are bypassing t entirely.
You're stepping outside the movie.
Yes. You are manipulating the underlying update sequence of reality itself. You aren't flying a ship through space. You are commanding the lattice to re-render your ship at a new coordinate, independent of the local clock.
You've hit on the exact reason why TDUFT is such a paradigm shift for advanced engineering. If you only know how to manipulate T and standard dimensions, you are trapped in the classical physics sandbox.
You're just playing with the pixels on the screen.
Exactly. But the left side of the equation, this tau updating the DN and dimensional nodes, is only telling us what is happening.
Right. The universe is updating its state outside of measurable time.
The next logical question, and really the bulk of Dukas's paper, is how is it doing it?
Right. What's the actual mechanism?
Right. If the left side is the what, the massive, sprawling right side of the master equation must be the engine actually doing the work.
So if reality is this tightly woven, spinning thread of geometry, how is it actively knotting itself together?
Exactly.
That leads us straight into the right side of the equation. And this brings us to a phrase that sounds incredibly intimidating on first read.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
The QCD Maximus kernel and geometric mixing.
It sounds like impenetrable jargon, doesn't it?
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
But the underlying concept is beautifully intuitive once you break it down.
Okay, break it down for me.
The right side of the equation begins with a massive sigma symbol. Now, in mathematics, sigma denotes a summation, an infinite adding up of parts.
Right.
Dukas calls this the infinite operator part of the equation. What this term dictates is that the universe is entirely interconnected. It doesn't evolve in isolation.
Meaning, one part doesn't change without affecting the rest.
Exactly. A single dimensional node doesn't just look at itself and decide to change. It evolves by actively mixing information from nearby dimensional layers.
I picture it like mixing paint on a massive palette.
Okay.
Like if you want to render the new state of a blue pixel, you don't just look at the blue. You have to pull a little bit of data from the green layer next to it and the purple layer on the other side and blend them mathematically to figure out what the new state should be.
A very helpful visualization. But here is where Dukas introduces a highly specific structural rule. The universe doesn't just pull data from anywhere.
It's not just a random blending.
No, the mixing is strictly regulated by a twisting, rotating geometric kernel. And the summation explicitly dictates that the tier shift values, which he represents with the Greek letter delta, must belong exclusively to a very specific set of numbers.
Yes. Okay, this is the part. 1, 3, and 6.
Exactly. 1, 3, and 6.
I circled this multiple times in my notes. I was genuinely stuck here for a while. The equation clearly says that to update dimension n, the universe looks at the dimension 1 step away, the dimension 3 steps away, and the dimension 6 steps away.
Correct.
But it deliberately, explicitly skips dimensions 2, 4, and 5.
Why? It seems counterintuitive.
Totally. If this is a seamlessly connected living lattice, why wouldn't it just look at the layer immediately next to it and then the one after that in sequential order? What happens to the data in layers 2, 4, and 5? Is it just a void?
It is not a void. The data is there, but rather it's an issue of geometric resonance. This is one of the most elegant, testable structural predictions in the entire TDUFT paper.
Okay.
The numbers 1, 3, and 6 are not random arbitrary integers Dukas just picked out of a hat. They are the first 3 Euler triangular numbers.
Triangular numbers. Okay, like setting up bowling pins. You put 1 pin in the front row, 2 in the second row, 3 in the third row.
Precisely. If you arrange physical dots into an equilateral triangle, you start with 1 dot. The next stable triangle you can make requires 3 dots.
Right.
The next stable triangle requires 6 dots, then 10, 15, and so on. In the mathematics of Euler's polygonal geometry, these specific numbers represent fundamental, naturally stable structural configurations.
Okay, I see.
Dukas posits that the dimensional lattice of reality is non-abelian.
Okay, let me stop you there. Non-abelian, what does that mean in this context?
Simply put, it means the order of operations strictly matters.
Okay.
If you put on your socks and then your shoes, you get a very different result than if you put on your shoes and then your socks.
Right. Very true.
The universe's underlying math is highly complex and sequence-dependent, and more importantly, it is structured geometrically, not linearly.
So reality isn't built on a flat square grid like a piece of graph paper.
No.
It's built on a complex triangular geometry.
Yes. When delta equals 1, that is nearest neighbor coupling. It's the lattice pulling data from the layer immediately next door. When delta equals 3, that represents the mathematical action of crossing a structural shell boundary within this triangular geometric lattice.
Right.
And when delta equals 6, that represents deep-tier resonance, where the lattice is coupling across a full, complex triangular shell. Dukas explicitly states that non-triangular transitions trying to jump 2 or 4 steps are structurally forbidden by the math.
So to answer my own question about what happens to the data in layer 2 or 4, it's not that the data doesn't exist, it's that the geometry simply doesn't align for the engine to pull from it directly.
Exactly. The universe can't mix information through non-triangular pathways because there is no stable energetic resonance there.
It just doesn't fit.
Right. It would be like trying to source a square mathematical peg into a triangular dimensional hole. The physics engine simply refuses to compute it.
That makes total sense when you frame it around resonance. It's exactly like striking a key on a grand piano.
Oh, good analogy.
When you hit the key, you hear the fundamental note, but you also hear very specific, mathematically rigid overtones ringing out in the higher frequencies.
The harmonics.
Right, the harmonics. You don't just get a muddy wash of every possible acoustic frequency. You only hear the harmonics that structurally resonate with the string.
Yes.
The universe is updating via triangular geometric harmonics.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
But obviously, it's not pulling equally from layers 1, 3, and 6, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a weighting system, like one is stronger than the other.
There is a highly specific weighting system, and this is where the paper takes a turn that feels almost mystical, yet it is grounded in rigorous math.
Oh, I love when math gets mystical.
Dukas introduces a constant to regulate this coupling, a constant we see everywhere in the natural world, but rarely as a foundational driver in quantum physics equations.
What is it?
The golden ratio. He represents it with the Greek letter phi.
The golden ratio, roughly 1.618.
That's the one.
This is the sequence we see everywhere in biology and nature. It dictates the spiral of galaxies, the arrangement of leaves on a plant stem, the curve of a nautilus shell. I mean, artists and architects have used it for centuries, from the proportions of the Parthenon to the Mona Lisa, because human brains find it inherently naturally pleasing.
And classical physics has largely treated the golden ratio as an emergent property, a biological coincidence or, an aesthetic curiosity.
It was a fun quirk in nature.
Right. But in the master equation, it is foundational. The strength of the mathematical coupling between these dimensional layers is governed by a term that explicitly includes phi to the power of -2 delta, multiplied by the sine of delta over phi.
Wow.
Furthermore, the actual geometric flow of this mixing process is shaped by what Dukas defines as a golden ratio scaled gradient.
I just want to pause and let it sink in for the listener.
It's big.
What Dukas is saying is that the fundamental source code of reality, the absolute baseline algorithm that renders existence, uses the exact same mathematical proportion to calculate the fabric of space that a sunflower uses to organize its seeds.
That is exactly what TDUFT proposes. The golden ratio isn't just an emergent quirk of biology. It is the core structural constant that regulates the coupling strength of the universe itself.
That's unbelievable.
It mathematically dictates how powerfully different dimensional layers are allowed to interact. The resonances, the moments of maximum interaction between the layers occur at specific mathematical intervals governed entirely by phi.
It completely shatters the barrier between the microscopic, cold math of quantum physics and the macroscopic living world we walk around in.
It does.
It makes the universe feel biological.
Biological is a very apt word, and that feeling is only reinforced by how this dimensional mixing actually moves.
How does it move?
If you look at the equation, there is a cross-product symbol, an x, that connects the torsion transport operator, written as Vt, to the dimensional gradient.
Now, in vector mathematics, a cross product usually means things are interacting perpendicular to each other. It creates rotation, right?
That is the geometric prediction, and it is profound. Dimensional evolution is not a straight line. The universe does not stretch or push in a simple linear fashion like a rubber band. It evolves by curl.
By curl.
It evolves through constant twist and torsion. The fabric of reality is wringing itself out, constantly rotating, folding, and spiraling.
Okay, I picture it like an artisan spinning wool into yarn.
Yeah.
You can't just pull the fiber straight. If you do, they just pull apart and you have nothing. To give the thread strength, to bind the individual fibers together into a cohesive whole, you have to twist them.
That is a perfect analogy.
The universe is constantly twisting its dimensional layers together, using golden ratio proportions, locking them into stable triangular distances.
It's a breathtaking image of reality.
It really is. But it raises a massive red flag for me mathematically.
What's that?
If this engine is constantly twisting, constantly pulling data from deeper and deeper resonant tiers, why doesn't it just spiral out of control?
Right, why doesn't it just cascade?
Yeah. Why doesn't the energy build up until the equation blows up to infinity?
You've identified the exact problem that plagues standard quantum field theory. When math reaches into the infinite, it tends to break. Every powerful engine requires a braking system.
So what's the break here?
In the denominator of this immense geometric kernel, Dukas includes a specific operator, the gamma function of 2n plus delta.
So how does the gamma function act as a brake?
The gamma function is a mathematical concept that grows incredibly fast. You can think of it as a continuous version of a factorial.
Okay.
As the calculation reaches into deeper and deeper dimensional tiers to pull information, the value of the gamma function explodes in size.
Right, because it's growing so fast.
Exactly. And because it sits in the denominator of the equation as it grows rapidly, it aggressively drives the overall value of the coupling term down.
Oh, I see.
It acts as a massive mathematical dampener. It aggressively suppresses the inter-tier coupling the deeper you go.
Ah, so it's a built-in shock absorber for reality. It allows the universe to be infinitely deep, drawing on these profound, beautiful triangular resonances. But the deeper the math reaches into the lattice, the harder the gamma function steps on the brakes.
Keeping it stable.
Right, ensuring the local reality remains coherent and doesn't just dissolve into infinite energy.
Exactly. And everything we have discussed up to this point, the tau updating the dimensional nodes, the triangular mixing, the golden ratio torsion, the gamma function, breaks all of this, makes up the QCD Maximus kernel.
Which is just the foundation, right?
Right. This is just the baseline. This describes the natural, undisturbed background heartbeat of the universe.
But this is where Dukas's paper stops being just a profound philosophical observation of nature and transitions into a literal engineering manual.
Yes, it shifts gears completely.
Because the equation doesn't stop there. Dukas adds subsequent terms to the right side of the equation that dictate how this baseline fabric can be deliberately, locally manipulated.
Hacked, essentially.
Yeah. The universe has a natural heartbeat, but Dukas provides the math to hack the pacemaker.
Yes. The equation moves from passive evolution to active intervention. And this brings us to the second major piece of the right side, and arguably the most shocking part of the paper for traditional physicists.
The acoustic part.
The acoustic inertial decoupling contribution, or the AID term.
The acoustic term. I'm going to be honest, this is the part of the paper that genuinely made me sit up in my chair.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's so wild. The math here includes a symbol, lambda AID, multiplied by the absolute value of an acoustic operator, psi acoustic squared. We are suddenly explicitly talking about sound.
We are talking about sound waves directly and explicitly linked to the fundamental dimensional field of reality.
That's just wow.
Dukas is stating mathematically that highly specific acoustic waves can actually alter local inertia.
Let me try to frame this for you listening, because acoustic inertial decoupling is a very dense phrase. Let's go back to an analogy.
Analogies are our best friends today?
They really are. Okay, imagine you are holding a large bucket filled with wet sand. It is incredibly dense, sluggish, and heavy. It takes a lot of force to move your hand through it.
Right.
Now imagine you take that bucket and you place it on an industrial vibrating platform, and you tune that platform to a very specific acoustic frequency. What happens to the sand?
It changes completely.
It undergoes a process called liquefaction. The acoustic vibration cancels out the friction between the individual grains of sand. Suddenly, that dense, heavy material acts exactly like water. You can easily push your hand right to the bottom.
It's a great demonstration of frequency-altering physical states.
Right. And Duca's equation is arguing that you can apply that exact same principle of acoustic liquefaction not just to a bucket of sand, but to the dimensional lattice of reality itself.
It is a stunning analogy, and mathematically, it is exactly what the psiacoustic operator represents in TDUFT.
Wow.
By introducing highly structured sound-based interference at the precise geometric frequencies of the lattice, you modulate the local inertial coupling of that specific dimensional tier.
So you're vibrating the universe.
You are effectively vibrating the fundamental structure so that the mass existing within it liquefies its connection to the surrounding gravitational framework.
And the wild implication here, which Dukas doesn't shy away from, he explicitly lists it in his predictions, is anti-gravity.
Correct. But we need to be very precise about what anti-gravity means in the context of TDUFT.
Okay, let's clarify that.
In classical aerospace engineering, overcoming gravity means brute force.
Like rockets.
Exactly. You build a massive rocket, you ignite tons of chemical fuel, and you push massive amounts of kinetic energy downward to fight the pull of the Earth. It's a wrestling match with gravity.
Brute force versus brute force.
Right. But in Ducas's operator framework, you aren't fighting gravity. You are simply reducing the effective inertial coupling of the object.
You're just untying the knot.
Exactly. By increasing the amplitude of the acoustic operator, you mathematically decouple the mass from the dimensional drag of the lattice.
It's like finding a cheat code to override the game engine's collision detection. You literally sing the right mathematical frequency into the fabric of space, and it lightens. The knot of reality loosens. Or, conversely, if you play the wrong frequency, it thickens.
It goes both ways.
The implications are staggering. You could theoretically make a tiny pebble weigh as much as an entire mountain, or you could make a massive battleship float like a dandelion seed, just by hitting the exact right acoustic resonance to sever its coupling to the dimensional lattice.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction.
It sounds like straight-up magic, but he is highly specific about how we might actually engineer this, isn't he?
He is. He notes that this inertial decoupling effect isn't something you can achieve just by playing a loudspeaker in an empty room.
You can't just blast a boombox at a rock.
No. It is highly dependent on the medium. He explicitly states that the effect is exponentially amplified in high-Q resonant media, and he specifically names quartz resonance.
Quartz, which is wild because quartz is already the backbone of so much of our existing technology. We use quartz crystals in our digital watches and computers to keep time, precisely because they vibrate at such an incredibly stable, predictable frequency when you apply electricity to them.
They are natural oscillators.
Right. Dukas is suggesting that if we pump the correct acoustic operator, the precise harmonic frequency of the lattice, into a highly resonant material like quartz, we can literally decouple an object from the gravitational field.
It's sitting right there as a rigorous mathematical operator.
It forces you to completely recontextualize so many historical anomalies and fringe engineering theories.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, there are decades of unverified accounts of fringe inventors or classified aerospace programs experimenting with acoustic levitation, spinning magnets, and quartz crystals.
And mainstream science has always dismissed them.
Completely, because classical physics says sound waves cannot cancel gravity. But if gravity is just a shadow projection of this deep D-tier lattice, and acoustic resonance can locally dampen that mathematical projection, then manipulating gravity is no longer an impossible physics paradox.
No, it simply becomes a complex acoustic engineering problem.
So we have the math for stargates by manipulating tau. We have the math for floating mountains by using acoustic quartz resonance.
It's a pretty good list so far.
It's an incredible list.
Yeah.
But here is the massive practical problem. Building a universe, or even just hacking a small piece of one, requires an immense amount of power.
Yes, it does.
If reality is this infinitely deep, twisting lattice of operators, what fuels it? If I want to build one of these anti-gravity drives, where do I plug it in? How do you tap into the energy of a system that is infinitely deep?
That brings us to the final and perhaps most consequential piece of the master equation.
The zero-point term.
Yes, the zero-point term. This is the mathematical framework for vacuum energy extraction.
Pulling energy out of thin air, basically.
Exactly. In the equation, it is written as a negative coupling constant, which Dukas calls kappa Zp, multiplied by a complex interaction between three specific operators:
Okay, what?
the electric tier operator, the current tier operator, and the magnetic tier operator.
Okay, let's break down the specific notation Dukas uses here, because it's very deliberate. The text explicitly says E at D2, J at D2, and B at D3.
To map this to classical physics, E represents the electric field, J represents current density, and B represents the magnetic field.
Okay.
But we have to remember our foundational rule of the operator-first ontology. In TDUFT, there are no continuous classical fields floating invisibly in the air.
Right. Everything is an action. Everything is an operator on a node.
These are discrete operators acting on very specific dimensional tiers. Dukas is stating that electric behavior exclusively operates on dimensional tier 2.
Okay.
Current behavior exclusively operates on dimensional tier 2.
That is a huge distinction. They aren't just invisible clouds of energy. They are specific mathematical actions happening on distinct, separate layers of the reality lattice.
Exactly. And the equation sets up a cross-product interaction between them. It dictates J at D2 crossed with B at D3 added to E at D2. This entire complex interaction is mediated by the kappa Zp operator, which acts as the vacuum coupling mapping operator.
So what actually happens physically when you force these electromagnetic operators to interact across these specific dimensional tiers?
The crucial detail is the negative sign sitting in front of the entire term in the equation.
Okay, what does the negative mean?
That negative sign indicates that this specific interaction reduces the local dimensional density. When you configure electromagnetic fields precisely at the D2 and D3 levels and cross them mathematically, you literally thin the fabric of reality.
You thin the fabric.
Yes.
I'm imagining pulling a loose thread on a very tightly woven wool sweater. If you pull it just right, the weave separates and a small gap opens up in the material.
That's exactly it.
And when you open a gap in the infinitely dense dimensional lattice of the universe, what comes out?
Pure energy.
Pure energy.
This is the exact mechanism for pulling limitless energy directly from the vacuum of space. By locally thinning the D-tier density through highly structured electromagnetic cross-interactions, you create a dimensional pressure gradient.
Pressure gradient.
The deeper, infinitely energetic layers of the lattice rush in to fill the thinned-out area, allowing you to extract energy from the infinite depth of the system.
This connects so many massive dots.
Doesn't it?
Yes. When you look at the list of phenomena that Dukas claims this single equation explains, he lists zero-point motors and stacked plate electrogravitics, right alongside gravity, time dilation, and acoustic levitation.
He ties it all together.
Think about the history of physics for a second. Classical physics treats electromagnetism and gravity as totally separate, completely unrelated forces.
Right, they don't talk to each other in standard models.
Albert Einstein spent the entire latter half of his life, decades of work, desperately trying to unite gravity and electromagnetism into a single theory.
The unified field theory.
And he failed. He failed because he was trying to stitch together a continuous, smooth space-time with the discrete, chunky fields of quantum mechanics.
And Dukas unites them effortlessly in a single line of math because he doesn't treat them as separate forces at all.
Exactly.
Gravity isn't a force. It is simply the baseline torsion of the dimensional nodes. Electromagnetism isn't a force. It is an operator acting specifically on tiers 2 and 3 of those exact same nodes.
And acoustic resonance isn't a force. It is a frequency that modulates the inertia of those nodes.
Right. They are not different machines. They are all just different levers pushing on the exact same underlying mathematical structure.
It's all the exact same machine.
Yeah.
You pull the acoustic lever and gravity drops.
Yeah.
You turn the electromagnetic dial precisely at D2 and D3 and you bleed limitless energy from the vacuum.
It is a single, unified master operator.
Which brings us to a meta question that Dukas himself poses in the text of the paper. And honestly, I think it's one of the most profound philosophical parts of the entire deep dive.
I agree completely.
He asks a seemingly simple question. He says, why do the equations become immense?
It is a vital question to address because it directly challenges the aesthetic bias of modern science.
The aesthetic bias.
Yeah. In classical physics, elegance is inextricably equated with simplicity. E equals mc squared is celebrated around the world not just because it's true, but because it is tiny.
It's catchy.
Exactly. The assumption among physicists has always been that the ultimate theory of everything, The final equation that explains the universe will be a short, simple, beautiful little equation you can print on a coffee mug or a t-shirt.
But the universe master equation is massive.
It is huge.
It's a sprawling, visually intimidating summation of golden ratio kernels, complex torsion operators, acoustic decoupling factors, and zero-point extraction gradients.
It takes up half the page.
Yeah. And to a classically trained physicist, that doesn't look elegant. It looks messy. It looks like you've just taken a bunch of disparate theories and bolted them onto the side of a machine to make it work.
But Dukas provides a profound counterargument to that bias. He states, the equation is immense because reality is connected and organic.
There's that word again. Organic.
When you add a subsystem in PDUFT, like the acoustic levitation term or the zero-point energy term, you are not adding a separate clunky bolt to a machine. You are revealing a new vital organ in a living, breathing structure.
Let me use human anatomy to make this concrete.
Okay.
If you want a simple, elegant equation to describe a human being, you might write down something like oxygen plus food equals energy.
Simple and true.
And that's true. But it's a phenomenological fit. It's a shadow on the wall. It describes the macro result.
Exactly.
But if you want the actual master equation of a human body, the engineering blueprint to build one, you have to map the cardiovascular system, the central nervous system, the lymphatic system, the digestive tract, the cellular mitosis.
And that map becomes immense.
It becomes incredibly complex. But not because it's poorly designed. It's immense because the human body is infinitely complex and entirely interconnected. You cannot separate the heart from the lungs. They are part of the exact same living lattice.
That is a brilliant articulation of Dukas's core philosophy. Dukas argues that an infinite dimensional lattice, a lattice with infinite depth governed by the complex torsion of the golden ratio, mathematically requires an infinite, immense operator.
It just has to be big.
The more of reality you attempt to accurately model, the bigger the equation must necessarily become. As he writes in the paper, it is immense not because it's complicated, it is immense because it's complete.
Wow. Immense because it's complete.
Standard physics has spent a century trying to chop reality up into isolated, neat little mathematical boxes. Put quantum mechanics in this box, put general relativity in that box, put thermodynamics over there.
And it doesn't work.
No, Dukas says you cannot chop up a living organism and expect it to still function.
The size reflects the truth. Reality is one connected system. That is such a powerful paradigm-shifting statement. It completely changes how you view the universe around you.
It really does.
We aren't living in a dead clockwork mechanism that is slowly winding down towards thermal equilibrium and heat death. We are living inside an infinite, breathing, organic mathematical structure.
And accepting that immensity leads to the ultimate unification that physics has been chasing for a century.
Right.
By accepting this immense, organic master operator, Dukas can draw a straight, unbroken mathematical line between phenomena that sound like pure science fiction and the mundane physical phenomena we experience every single day.
I want to read that list of phenomena again, because when you view it through the lens of everything we've just discussed, it is absolutely astonishing.
Let's hear it.
Gravity, time, stargates, starships, anti-gravity, zero-point motors, acoustic decoupling, quartz resonance, stacked plate electrogravitics. This single massive equation claims that every single one of these concepts is just a different projection of the left side of the equation. The tau rate of change of the dimensional field mapped onto specific mathematical coupling channels on the right side.
It completely redefines what is physically possible. It means that stargates and zero-point motors aren't breaking the laws of physics. They aren't magical. They are simply utilizing the true, deeper laws of physics, the TDUFT operators.
So they're just engineering problems now.
Exactly. It reveals that our current cutting-edge technology is basically just humanity playing around in the shallow, low-resolution, phenomenological shadows of Newton and Einstein.
So let's pull all of this together. We spent this deep dive exploring a framework that, frankly, upends the entire apple cart of modern science.
It throws the apple cart off a cliff.
It really does. We've moved away from a universe made of empty space and static nouns into a reality built on an active, operator-first ontology where everything is a verb.
We have seen that space-time isn't a smooth, continuous rubber sheet, but a discrete, pixelated, twisting lattice.
Right.
A lattice driven by the resonance of Euler's triangular numbers and the torsion of the golden ratio. We have learned that time itself, as we experience it, is localized, while the true evolution of the universe, tau, ticks away independently on a deeper layer.
We've explored the wild implications of the acoustic term, how singing the right frequency into high-Q quartz can theoretically cancel out gravity by severing the mass from inertial drag.
And we've seen how manipulating electromagnetism at specific dimensional tiers can thin the fabric of reality, opening a valve to extract infinite zero-point energy from the vacuum.
The fundamental takeaway from Dukas' paper is that everything we currently know, all the triumphs of Einstein and quantum field theory, are merely a limiting case.
Exactly. General relativity works perfectly fine if you artificially force the infinite cross-tier coupling to collapse into a flat continuum.
Like squishing a 3D object onto a 2D piece of paper.
Right. But in reality, the universe is infinitely deeper, infinitely more complex, and driven by this singular living master operator.
It is a massive amount of information to process, and it challenges a lot of deeply held assumptions. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
What's that?
Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about the math.
Hmm.
We've talked about operators, dimensional tiers, and the deep hidden architecture of reality. But Dukas ultimately calls this an organic universe, a living equation.
Yes, he does.
If Dukas is actually right, if our current laws of classical physics are just the outermost, thinnest, lowest resolution layer of an infinitely deep organic mathematical lattice, what happens the day humanity finally figures out how to build the physical tools to interface with it directly?
That's the billion-dollar question.
It is. What happens the day some engineer in a lab actually figures out how to sing the exact right acoustic equation into a quartz crystal, and a boulder lifts silently off the ground? If this equation truly is the master source code of reality, what on earth are we going to build when we finally learn how to type?